Okay. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. This is one conversation I have waited to have a very long time. My name is Bidemi Makmodi, but of course, you know that I'm not Irene Olumese, even though it's a takeover of her platform and her handle on this for this conversation. For those of you who have followed Dr. Irene Olumese, you would know that Irene is all things purpose beyond pain. Her thing is that life can continue in spite and despite of the pain that you must have, the pain you have had to go through in life. Dr. Irene Titilola Olumese is an author, inspirational speaker, Bible study teacher, and certified faith-informed professional transformational trauma coach. That's a mouthful, yes. But that's what all of you need to know this evening is I'm talking to my sister. That's the thing you need to know this evening. And because I know Dr. Irene and I know her, when I say I know her, I mean like I know her. This is a conversation that in my mind we're sitting on a couch and we finally got around to talking about her story, not in the light of what she's gone through, but in the light of what has happened after all that she's gone through. So, what I would want to highlight for you that you need to know is that Irene is a lung transplant survivor with and a bilateral amputee. What that means in just simple terms is at some point in her life, due to protracted illness spanning over 20 years, Irene's lungs began to pack up. And of course, even by elementary science, that if that gets to happen to you, unless, a miracle happens, which is what happened with Irene, death is the only option. But in her own case, thankfully, she was able to get a set of lungs transplanted into her. But in the process, she lost both her legs from the knees down, so she had to be amputated. But this gave birth to the Feet of Grace Foundation, a foundation I'm very proud to be part of, and great work in the last 10 years beyond what we can talk about today. Today is not about the feet of grace. Today is about organ donation. Because sometimes I sit there, I wonder sometimes I watch movies and I like medical movies. So I watch medical movies and sometimes I see, oh, someone is an organ donor, and then they carry the card around. So maybe they're in a crash or something. And then I see that moment where their families is wondering whether, they're trying to convince their family to give up, their parts so that they will be donated so that some people would live. And when I find myself watching those movies, sometimes I get reflective and I ask myself, is this something I'd want to do? And what's the case for doing this? I'm an African true and true. And so, because I'm an African true and true, we have many things against organ donation. So, today I'm going to be representing the voice of Africa, not only to understand what Irene has gone through, what brought us to the place of organ donation, and how whether that's a benefit or an advantage, and whether she feels guilt sometimes because someone died for her to get this. But in all of that, I also want to ask the questions, Africa, which way? Nigeria especially, what is it we do about organ donation? Is it something that we believe in? Is it something that we deal with? And all of those questions are the questions that we're going to be answering this evening. So that I don't monopolize this conversation, Irene, good evening, and thank you for choosing to have me take over your platform like this. How are you doing, ma'am? You are muted. I cannot hear you.
I am doing great and excited to be here. And this is something that I've looked forward to that we can do a long time ago. And I'm so happy we are doing this today.
Mhm. So welcome. Thank you so much. So we'll just jump right in because we don't have all the time in the world. Some people go to bed early.
We know them.
Some people go to bed super early. But we want to look at what led to your need to receive organs from another person. Could you just give us, like, in a very few minutes,
There
what
is an
led
echo.
to
I'm
your
hearing
need?
people say that there's an echo.
Can you hear me?
We've been looking for where the echo is. We can't find
Well, we'll go on regardless.
it. All right. We're going to go on. We can seem to understand. We will try and fix the technical glitch as we go on. So, what led to the transplant? Let me
Yes.
try and do a mother of summary. Like you mentioned earlier, I had problems with my lungs that we saw an indication of it in 1993, and I had the first lung transplant, and things did not improve. And I had the first lung surgery, sorry, and things did improve. In 2003, 10 years later, both lungs collapsed, and I had to have another surgery on the lung. And then 2007, my doctors realized that my lungs could no longer hold enough air for me to have sufficient oxygen. So I became oxygen dependent. And then from then on, the situation just went downhill with my lungs until 2010, when the doctors told me that they had exhausted all medical options and the only option left was for me to have a lung transplant.
So
So
let me
that's
ask you, the first you said lungs collapsed, and I'm
hmm,
sitting here and I'm thinking, how does that happen? I know, I don't want us to delve into the medicalities of it, but I want
yeah.
to know what happens. I'm trying to understand what happens to a man whose lungs collapse.
Okay. The first thing that I felt was that, no, not here. The first thing that I felt was that I was coughing a lot. And anyway, I have been coughing nonstop for years. And then this particular period, I was in Accra. And I realized that every time I wanted to lie down to sleep, it was as if there was a rock on my chest. And if I tried to breathe on my back, I couldn't breathe. So I had to prop myself up. And then I was driven all the way from Accra to Tamale, about 11 hours travel. When I got to Tamale, we found that it was becoming more and more difficult for me to breathe. Trying to sleep was a challenge. So eventually, that Sunday, I realized that things had become really difficult. So I called my pastor that I can't breathe. I called my husband and his neighbor. I described what was going on to him. And he said, they need to get you to a hospital right away. So apparently, what was happening was there was fluid collection in my chest, which was now making the lungs difficult to expand. And eventually, it collapsed.
So
I needed to,
essentially, if I had to describe this, it meant that your lungs were drowning in your own fluid.
exactly.
See? So tell me, because what the focus is organ donation. Um,
Yes.
as far as I'm concerned, we will talk about this from maybe on three layers. What's the experience medically and legally in getting on the organ donor list? How
Okay.
do you, what is it that you need to do? That's layer one. Layer two, I want to talk to you about it from the angle of someone who knows definitely every day you wake up and you have woken up in the past 10 years at least, you know without a shadow of doubt that someone else's lungs are working on the inside of you. What burden does that put on you? Number three, as a Christian, we're also going to talk about the things, the attendant things that come with that. But let's begin by, how did you get on the donor list? On the, yes,
On
the
the
transplant.
waiting list. Okay. Um, when my doctors told me in 2010 that I needed organ donation, I think we walked out of that corridor. All I was thinking about was somebody's going to die for me to live. And that was tough. And of course, I was required to do a medical workup for me to be even a suitable candidate, given my history. So what we did was that the doctors told me where to go, the hospital to go, where the workup will be done, because in Switzerland, there is a center for lungs transplant. So I went to see the professor in charge to book the workup. And he sat us down and he gave us the lowdown about lung transplant and why he felt that I wasn't a suitable candidate because of my medical history. But then, of course, I will have to do all those tests to prove whether I was or not. So I was in the hospital for 3 days while they run all the battery of tests. It was at the end of it, after they discussed together, that they agreed that I could be a suitable donor. I could be a suitable candidate
The
for
day
lung
you
transplant.
heard even that, okay, you are now eligible
Yes.
on the list, how did that feel?
I still the same feeling. Somebody is going to die for me to live. How do you pray? I couldn't. It was doing my head in. And what am I going to do with this? What kind of prayer do you pray? And it was in that space that God led me to Isaiah 43. And as I read Isaiah 43, because you are precious in my sight, I give men in exchange for your life because I love you. I think it was at that time that it actually occurred to me, or it became clear to me that God could give someone for me. And when I read that and it sank in, that was when I began to pray that whoever is going to be my organ donor will be a candidate for heaven.
Yes, we're now praying that that person will be a candidate for heaven.
Hmm. Hmm.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Amazing. So let's fast
I
forward.
said to myself, if this person is going to die for me to live, if God is going to give this person's life for mine, I don't want this person to be lost to eternity. I want this person to make it to heaven. And whatever is going to require for God to make it possible for that person to be a candidate for heaven, it should keep me alive. I'm going to go off video temporarily while you talk so that we can resolve this issue.
Okay, that's
Um,
okay. So here's the thing that we're in a conversation with Dr. Irene Olumesi, who is We're actually celebrating 10 years post lung transplant, and we're looking at what the process is for organ donation. How do you, as a believer, someone who believes in God and has prayed and believes in healing and divine interventions, how do you um, bring yourself to the place where you begin to embrace the reality that for you to live, someone else may have to have died for you to be able to live? That's the conversation we were having before she went off this video for a bit, so that we can fix the issues with her sound. But as I was listening to her, something occurred to me, because I know that we don't arrive here just at once. Something gets us here. You know, she told us that 3 years before she even got the chance to have an organ transplant or lung transplant, she couldn't breathe on her own anymore. So she had to be oxygen dependent. When she comes back, I want to ask her what that felt like, you know, and how did she cope with life at that level? Because some of us can't even stay in a room with the windows shut, and it becomes stuffy. It becomes something that we become really uncomfortable, and it becomes unbearable for some of us. We can't stay in places where it is a bit dark. And here was someone who had to live on oxygen for years before ultimately she received the transfer. Welcome back, Irene. Oh, she's gone off again. Okay, so I'm not going to have this conversation by myself, obviously, but I'll wait for her to come, then we'll continue this conversation. But what I would like you to do is, if this has been a subject matter, if you're watching this evening, obviously to be that is something that you have been interested in. If you have questions that you want me to take, please just share the comments and the questions in the comments. The questions will get to me ultimately, and I'll be able to put them before Irene so that she could answer them. No, when I think about when she asked me if I could do this with her today, I jumped on it. Actually, she didn't ask me. She was asking me something else, and I realized she was going to do this. And I said, Guy, I have to be here and I have to be part of this conversation. Why is this conversation needful? Because as someone who is a leader of faith in my small capacity, it becomes increasingly onerous sometimes to be able to draw the line between faith and medicine. And I wanted us to be able to have this conversation, because I want to be able to close the gap between faith and medicine. My conversation that runs around my head every time is this faith is can we have faith without medical intervention? And can medical intervention be propelled by faith? So that's one angle that I wanted to look at, and is why I'm excited to be on this conversation this evening. So please send in your questions, and as the questions come, they will be sending them to me. So if it's something that we can answer quickly, we will answer them. But while we wait for Irene to come, I want to just read the timelines to you for the things that she's had to deal with in this time. Okay, Irene, you're back. I've been talking to myself, and yet I'm not a lung transplant survivor. So
our listeners on YouTube are really challenged.
they can't hear us, or what's the issue?
The echo is really bad. So I'm going to try and change my device.
Okay, yeah.
All right,
Okay.
I'm going to try and change my device.
Okay, so we'll have to wait. Okay, so before that, I was saying that I was going to read to you Irene's timelines on this journey. I'm just going to, because sometimes when you see someone, we always want the testimonies that people have, but we don't usually, without understanding the journey they've been on. So I want to run through her timelines for you. In 1993, Irene had child loss and the first surgery on her lungs. In 1995, the situation with the lungs worsened with some symptoms. There are very many medical terms here. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce them. In 1998, she had her final diagnosis. In 2003, she had another set of another surgery on the lungs. In 2007, she became oxygen dependent. That meant that she had to carry canisters or tanks of oxygen with her wherever she went. And she had to time herself. If the oxygen in her tank could not suffice for a certain period, she didn't leave home. And that would mean that after a while, she was no longer able to take on employment. This is someone that is a PhD holder and was working with an international agency. In 2010, doctors proposed a lung transplant required to start, and she required to start using a non-invasive ventilator for the night. So imagine going to bed at night and you have gadgets around you just because you have to need that to stay alive. You see, when we wake up or when we go to sleep and we wake up and we inhale and we exhale, that's the thing that Irene couldn't do by herself anymore, that she now needed ventilators, she needed gadgets to be able to breathe the breath of life that we have and we don't count as anything. In 2012, she had a growth on her neck. That would also mean surgery, right? In 2023, yes, obviously, January of 2013, rather, she had surgery to remove the cyst in her neck. April 13th, 2013, she went in for lung transplant. This is very instructive because this was about a few weeks before I was meant to meet Irene in person. We had met online, we had spoken, and we had agreed that I was going to come to Geneva to she was going to host a Sister Power event, and I was going to come to Geneva to speak at that event. So we had started the arrangements, tickets had been bought, visas had been received. We're just counting down to make that trip. When one day her husband called me and said to me, introduced himself because I had never spoken to him before as Irene's husband, and said to me, I don't know how much you know about Irene's condition. For the life of me, I knew sometimes when we're in a conversation, she would begin to cough, but I had no clue how serious what she was dealing with was, because most of those conversations, I'll probably be whining about something, and Irene will be the one encouraging me on the journey that I thought I was on, that was so uncomfortable and inconvenient. So when he said to me, I don't know how much Irene told you about her condition, the only response I had was, Irene did not tell me anything about her condition. And that was when he started to tell me, oh, this and that is what the echo is right now.
Okay. Okay, so I'm on my iPad. Is it any better?
Well, I can hear you. I could always hear you. So.
Okay, is that shut down? Okay, so this is how this goes. Then it's coming from StreamYard because now I'm using my iPad.
Okay. I hope none of these devices.
Know what the problem is anymore.
I hope none of these devices are plugged to the electricity.
None. Oh, the only one that was plugged to electricity was my laptop.
Okay, because that could actually be the.
Okay, so we're using all options possible to see. Am I still cracking on
Your sound is good now for me. So let's find out from those on YouTube.
Okay. Okay, I can hear the cracking. I can still hear the cracking. I don't know where it's coming from. Thank you, God. We don't need this today. Oh, it's incredible. Because now I'm on my iPad, I'm on another system, and I still don't understand why we're having the echo. I don't. Honey, shut yours down for a minute. Come out of StreamYard and shut it down. Okay, thank you, Jesus. It shall be done today, whether the devil likes it or not. Okay. How are you hearing me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. We'll continue
Yes, I
and
think we
trust it.
uh,
Yes.
I think we should. And then if someone is on YouTube, let them just
Yes.
tell us what it is that they can hear.
Yes. Um, if you're on YouTube, if you're not hearing us, please go to Facebook. Please go to Facebook because it seems as if the sound is worst on YouTube. Okay, let's go.
All right, so I was telling them I was sharing how Dr. Peter called me to say, oh, I don't know how much Irene told you about her condition. And obviously, Irene didn't tell me anything. Long and short, that's how I found out that she had gone in for lung transplants. But at that point, she also left a message and said, no matter what happened, the Sister Power event had to go on. So when I went to Geneva for the first time, Irene was in hospital. She had had a transplant. I think she had even gone into coma at that time. And I spent a week or so, I can't remember, with my husband in Geneva. And I didn't get to meet with her. But now she's back because of our time. We go back to the conversation we were having. And the
Mhm.
conversation, the question I was about to ask you before we started to have the technical issues was around what it felt like to have to, what it felt, what
Carrying
it felt
oxygen.
to, yes, to have to leave, to live on oxygen. What was, just walk us through that in a few sentences.
Okay, so that started when I was in Egypt, in Cairo, and I came in, and the doctor said to me that I needed to be on oxygen. So at first they gave me a canister that I was blowing in, and then we had to have a reservoir in the house. And this, with the reservoir, we had to pipe the oxygen all the way up to the bedroom. And we had a supplier that was bringing me the oxygen once a week, every Wednesday. And so from then on, from one big reservoir, it changed to having to use 3 reservoirs. So when I have to go out, we fill the small one from the reservoir, and I know how long each one will last. And we have to be sure that we are back before it is finished. So that was how we manage things. We go to church with 2 bottles, then I change from one to the other. And by the time I'm on the second one, we need to start getting ready to go home. And that was the situation for 7 years.
Wow. So what that means is if you're with us this evening and you're watching this broadcast and you can breathe, inhale and exhale by yourself every single day, because these are the things we take for granted. We go to sleep, we wake up, we breathe in, we breathe out. Was Irene. It's getting there's a screeching sound that is now worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let's quickly go to the main conversation we want to have. Talk to me about um, post transplant. What was it like for you?
All right. So the first few weeks post transplant, I was in coma, and I didn't know what was happening on this side of the world. But where I was, it was nightmare after nightmares. I was having challenges with the things that I was saying. I was in my sleep, but I was frightened. It was becoming like a tug. I was in between two forces, like the rope that they were pulling, and it was like the tug of war. And we went on like this, one nightmare, one scene after the other. But the good news with all the scenes that I saw was that I escaped. I escaped from a concave. There was a place where I was being pulled down into the dark, and another would pull me back up into light. There was one in which I found myself in a room and somebody was pointing an accusing finger and was saying that it's not you, but it's somebody else. It's because of somebody else. So, and it was very confusing. Needless to say, that I woke up, and so in that coma, what I was seeing also included, it felt as if I was in a place where it was winter and it was snowing heavily, and there was Christmas. And I knew I went into the hospital in April. So I was wondering how we jumped from April to Christmas, and or where in the world was I that it was snowing at this time. So, when I now came out of coma, I was really confused. I didn't know where exactly in the world I was or what time it was. So there was a lot of confusion about that. And because I couldn't speak, I was trying to get people to understand what I'm trying to say. But they didn't understand because I had a tube in my throat that made it difficult for me to be able to speak. So nobody seems to understand the gestures that I was making. Okay. So that was what was happening on my side in my sleep.
Let me I remember that we've had this conversation about when the ambulance came, when you received the call that said that lungs had come available.
Yeah.
Let's repeat that for a bit.
Okay, so when the call came,
because of the friction and the back and forth, our account is not as detailed and as according to flow. But I remember that you've not told us what happened when you received the telephone call that organs had come, that lungs had come out.
So the call came in on a Saturday. It was, of course, April 13th was a Saturday. It was around 4:30 p.m. I was at home with my son. My husband had gone to church for choir. And I was in the midst of preparing for the conference and writing. And then my phone rang. And of course, I had been told that if I get a call from that number, it meant that an organ donor had been found for me. And so when I saw Professor Clara, I knew immediately. And fear just gripped my heart. it was as if my heart melted within me. So in answering the phone, I couldn't even say a word. And the man said, Madam Irene, I said yes, and introduced himself. I'm Professor Rocha, and I said, yes, I know. And he said, how are you doing? I couldn't answer. And then he said, we're ready for you. And I knew what that meant, that you're ready for me. And I think in that moment, I just had a flash of somebody lying on the bed, and people surrounded the bed and they were crying. And that just hit me below the belt. I mean, I literally, you know, I just dropped in my chair in that moment, and my heartbeat became so fast, I couldn't talk. And they had to ask me if I was okay. And I said yes. And then he asked me, has anything changed since my last checkup? I said, nothing has changed. And then he asked me, do you want us to send the ambulance for you? I said, no. I said, no. No, actually, it wasn't a question. It was an information, that the ambulance will come for you. And I said, no. And he dropped the phone. I mean, he just told me that we're ready. We'll be waiting for you. I said, I need to find my husband. So I started, by then, Himeme had come downstairs because, I mean, he heard I think I called him. He was in his bedroom. I called him down and I said, call your father. And of course, father was at choir practice. Every effort to reach him was abortive. He had turned his phone to silence. And so we started calling all the choir members one by one until we found one that picked up the phone. And I had to tell him, they have called. Of course, he knew what that meant. And I told him that I told them that they should send ambulance. So while I was still on the call with him, they called me from an ambulance station that they have been informed that I needed to be taken to Lausanne, which is about 50 to 50, 60 kilometers away, and that they were on their way. So now I'm praying that my husband will get home before they get here. He got home, and by then I had to go on the ventilator because my heart rate was now so fast because of all that was happening, just to calm myself down. I wasn't breathing well. So by the time he got home, 10 minutes later, the ambulance was at my door. And they just checked me. And the way our house is with the spiral stairway, they couldn't bring the stretcher up. So they asked if I could work. I walked down the staircase and they supported me with the ventilator on and everything. And as soon as we got down, they just lifted me on the stretcher straight into the ambulance. And this ambulance started running and running. And
wow. Talk to me about make a case for how organ donations save lives.
Okay, let me start. Just let's try something. While I'm speaking, can you mute from your side? Let's see if it makes any difference. Yeah. Okay. So, organ donation saves lives. It actually made a difference. Organ donation saves lives. And I can say that over and over again. Why? Because I know she's done it. And it's yes.
You know it is fine.
Yeah.
There's nobody.
Okay. Praise God. We finally found a solution. So here is the thing. There are many people today who are going through some severe medical challenges, and I will use kidney as an example. People who are at end-stage renal failure, they need organ donation. People who have respiratory problem like I've had, they need organ. The only solution left for them is an organ transplant. And one thing that we know is that if somebody has registered to be an organ donor before they passed away, one organ donor can literally save 8 people's lives. And that all those organs that will go with a person to the grave can keep 8 people who will die without that donation. In the year that I had my transplant in Switzerland, almost 50 people died on the waiting list. I cannot emphasize it more than that, that where it is possible, when we are in countries where it is possible and we are healthy, we can opt to be an organ donor when the inevitable happens. But there are 2 types of donors that we can have: the living donor and, of course, the deceased donor. In my own situation, it had to be a deceased donor because it's the lungs. And I needed the 2 lobes, not just one. So I got the 2 lobes of the lungs. People, for example, for those with kidney, most healthy adults can live with 1 kidney. And therefore, every healthy adult can be a potential organ donor, a living donor. But it has to be voluntary. It has to be something that is driven by compassion and a desire to see somebody else live.
So obviously, that also means that it has to be legal. So it's not harvesting organs, it's not a business. It has to be legal. That means that it has to be supported by the rules of the nations or the countries where we live, and it has to be driven by compassion. Okay, so let me ask you this question. And as a person of faith, I've heard this argument before, where someone said that organ donation or trying to keep someone alive, using another person's organs is playing God. What do you think? I know obviously you have benefited, so you'll be partial, but I know that beyond being partial, there is, having gone through the process, there is information you have that we may not have. So I'm asking, is it really playing God?
I think you should go muted now. It's absolutely not playing God. I disagree 100% that we are playing God. Otherwise, we would say when Jesus raised people from the dead, he was God. But it was not only Jesus that raised people from the dead. Apostles also raised some people from the dead. We will say that healing people is playing God. Science is a wisdom that was given by God. And up to today, as a person who has been a recipient, I still marvel at the science that could ensure that 2 human beings can match and hold the organ. I give thanks to God for it. I probably may have the same position if I didn't have a word that showed me clearly that God can give lives for my life. And having been at that space where I could say categorically that my organ donation was a gift from God, and I have a word that backs it, it proves to me that keeping people alive for a purpose cannot be against God. It cannot be counter to God's will. And let's look at my situation. The things that God has done with my life since I had organ donation, since I had a second chance to live again, far outweighs what I did for God before then. How many people have received hope through the testimony? And God gave me clear instructions. Share this testimony. Everywhere I will open the door for you. Obviously, because He wanted to use that story. There is no way anybody can convince me that what I have today is not by the divine orchestration of God.
Essentially, you've made my next question irrelevant. And that, because I was going to ask you, so is living or having a second chance at life by another man's organs, is that a miracle? So you've knocked it off the park. So I just said it because it was a question I wanted to ask.
Actually, let me respond to it in a bit. Please go mute. Because somebody has asked me this before, and I think that it is important for us to examine it. Please just consider that the opportunity of finding a suitable donor, one, is a miracle. Two, you go into surgery for almost 10 hours and you come out alive. I don't know which other miracle that could be. Three, that you can still hold the organ. This is 10 years, and I know that people have been a lung transplant survivor for 20 plus years. That can only be by the grace and mercy of God. So I believe that organ donation organ transplant is a miracle. And just look at the number of people who died while waiting, and you got it. I was on the waiting list for 3 years. Two, all the things that went wrong following the surgery, and I'm still alive. That is supernatural. I don't know what other definition of miracle that could possibly could be. Maybe we should ask a doctor. We could bring the doctor in and ask him. Maybe he has something to offer us to convince people that it is possible for this, that this is a miracle.
So I think I like that option. But before we get to bringing doctor in, I want you to talk to us, because people think that you walk into the hospital just because it's another person's set of organs, lung, kidney, stuff like that, that you walk in and you walk out. I know that every year, at least twice, you have to go for some major checks, that you have to stay in hospital just to maintain and sustain the organs that you have received. So talk to us about that post-surgery. I'm not talking of immediately after surgery. I'm saying in the intervening years, in the number of years that someone who's received transplant, organ transplant, in endeavoring to be able to keep the organs and keep them working and functional. Talk to me about the maintenance in culture, for lack of better words, and how to sustain that. Yes.
Praise God. Please mute. It's a high maintenance miracle, right? I'm required to be on an immunosuppressant for the rest of my life because my body can reject it if I'm not. Two, I'm required to go for checkups annual checkups, and many more in between. I see my doctors every quarter. I have to check my my pulmonary function to see how the lungs are doing. I have to do that every 3 months. And if I do have a chest infection, sometimes I have to have x-rays, CT scan done almost every year. And there have been times where they've had to go back inside for bronchoscopy. I've done bronchoscopy at least 4 times since I had the lungs. No, it's not a walk in the brace. It requires a lot of my attention to take care of this precious gift. It's a responsibility that requires diligence on my side. No matter how tired I am of taking medications, and believe me, there are days that I wish I don't have to take those medications, but I have to remember the cost of what I'm carrying in my chest. I have to take care of myself. I have to ensure that, during COVID, it was high risk for me. I was on the high risk list. And it meant that we literally shut, nobody could come in or go out. My son, who was at home, could not go out and mix with people for my sake. It requires sacrifices from my family as well. And don't get me started on what it costs in terms of the drugs, the medications. But we need to do what we need to do. We've been given a precious gift, and we are responsible for maintaining it. And we do what we have to do to maintain it.
Thank you for sharing. At this point again, I want to sensitize and remind our listeners and viewers out there, because I don't think that, I think more of us watching today can breathe by ourselves. We don't have to go through a transplant, and hopefully, because of the mercies of God, we won't need to. But what it is that I want to highlight here is that if you have life right now, and you can take in this breath and exhale by yourself, make sure it counts for God. Because Irene keeps saying it's high maintenance miracle. But when I know what it costs for me to receive these precious gifts, I'm quoting her, and I'm sure you heard her, I have to do whatever it takes to ensure that I maintain them. I have to take care of myself. I have to be responsible. Because here's the thing, the consideration that, all of this brings into my purview. It is the fact that Irene is living for 2 people now. She's making her own life, the opportunity for, a second chance at life for her account. And she's living. I think that there's no way that won't be on a bit of a burden on you to say, okay, let this other person not have died in vain. Whatever I can do within the life and the hours and the days and the years that I have, I want to make sure that it counts in eternity for both of us. And so if you have this life and you haven't done anything with it, and all we do is grovel and complain and all of those things, I think we need to have a rethink. Sorry that I'm going there, but the pastor in me will not let me I can't let that slide. I have to drill it in so that we know that all of us who have life and right now we have, this life at no cost. It's not at no cost, but not at the cost at which Irene is having to leave hers. We need to pay attention to that. Now, talk to me or appeal to those of us who are, God forbid, nobody is going to take my organs for something. Please just speak to us. Tell us what, make a case for why we need to consider this if we live in nations and communities where that is something that is allowed.
Okay. My question would be, just consider the fact that if you are in a country where organ donation is centrally coordinated and people can register to become organ donor, and you know that once I mean, life happens and you have to go, the inevitable has happened. I can't imagine what greater joy to what greater legacy that one can leave behind than to see that other people can live, have an opportunity to live. And remember, before people become, those who eventually become organ donors, before the organs are taken, it means that they have been certified clinically dead. They're brain dead. And they are keeping the body on a life support machine until the, the recipients are there so that the harvest, the organs can be taken and given to them. These organs are just going into the grave to rot. But it has the capacity to give life to 8 people who can make a difference, who can continue to extend your own life, because basically that's what you're doing. Extend your life. You are giving them an opportunity to extend their own lives as well. Yes, all of us are going to go at one time or the other. But if there is still a purpose for us to fulfill here, and that opportunity for somebody to live longer to fulfill that purpose, then I will be very happy to have my organs given to them to go on. The truth of the matter is that once I am gone, all this thing has nothing for me. It's going into the dust. And I believe that if they can serve the purpose of keeping somebody, a young person, a chance to live and see adulthood, another person an opportunity to live life again, somebody who has been supported by imagine who's had to go through excruciating pain to just keep alive. If we can make that difference for one or two other people, then it's worth giving attention to. But at the end of the day, we really have to be motivated and inspired to want to be an organ donor. It has to be driven, especially for those who are registering to be an organ donor in the event when the, death comes. So that's one side. The other side is, of course, living donor, like we agreed. It's not to be harvested for trade. It's not to be sold. All those ethical boundaries needs to be maintained. It has to be from the place of wanting to help when that opportunity arises. And so it's worth giving thought to, and it's worth praying about and hear what God says to you about it.
I promise you I'm sober. Because to our listeners and viewers out there, let's not forget that this is not that Irene woke up and started to pray that someone would die so that she could receive his or her lungs. But this is a choice that we individually can make so that we can contribute to the cycle of life in the cases where our own lives perhaps have reached their end. And so that's food for thought. And this is also food for thought because for Africa and for Nigeria, it's something we should begin to consider at the level of governance to determine, if this is a consideration, actually should be a consideration because, like she said, why waste it if the person's life has come to an end and these organs are still viable and they can save lives and they can continue to contribute, keep people alive to continue to contribute to society. Irene, I want you to speak to those who, for one reason or the other, one ailment or the other, are waiting on the miracle of an organ. I want you to speak to those ones.
No waiting is ever easy, especially when you can literally feel as if life is ebbing out of you. I have been there. But I just want to encourage you never to give up on hope. If there was something that kept me in that season, it was that knowledge that I could not afford to give up on the hope of a turnaround for good in this situation. I wore it on my bracelet, on my wrist for 3 years. Never give up on hope. Adamant, unyielding. I needed to keep myself reminded that there is a possibility. And if that possibility exists, I'm going to hold fast to the hope that it will become manifested in my own life. I surrounded myself with words that were encouraging me. I had it stuck everywhere in my bedroom and bathroom, what the word of God says concerning me and my life. Don't give up on hope of a turnaround for good. Don't give up on hope when you are in the waiting season. And when you are there, wait well, especially if you still have some strength in you to do something. One thing that was sure for me was that I may not be able to do something that was physically exerting, but I was busy. I planned the work with the conference you were coming from. I was taking people out to go to places just as long as I know how much oxygen I needed to be able to drive there and back. I wasn't ready to die before death comes. And I was not ready to stop living before death comes. And while I still had life and I had the support to keep alive, I lived life by the grace and the mercy of God. Oh, was it challenging? Was it difficult? Yes. There were days that even to get out of bed was impossible. Just moving from my bed to my bathroom was as if I would pass out, because even with the oxygen supplementation at 4 liters, I actually got to 5 liters per hour. There were times when I still was not getting enough. I have been to have my shower, and I knew that if I did not come out immediately and put on, oxygen, I was going to pass out. Sometimes it could be that difficult. But amid all of this, we have to choose to live. We have to choose to live and refuse to die when you are still alive.
Choose to live and refuse to die while you are still alive. As you described that, as you spoke to that, it dawned on me that we couldn't shut this down without talking about the support system. The how vital it is to have the right support system and the people who would, so that if there are caregivers listening to us, to people who have organ disease right now, so that you can also encourage them and perhaps highlight some things that they could do in the states that they are in right now. Would you like to speak to that, please?
One truth that I cannot deny is the fact that I could not have made it without the support of my husband and my sons. I couldn't. They gave me a reason to wake up each day, use that nebulizer. I mean, that was all I was doing, nebulizing 3-4 times in a day, put that oxygen mask on, put on the ventilator, because at first it started with just using the ventilator in the night so that my lungs do not forget to breathe. Then as the situation got worse, I had to use it even several hours during the day. Of course, that meant that There are days that I cannot enter the kitchen for days. And my husband will bring breakfast to me in bed before he goes to work, come back home in the afternoon to come and get me food to eat, then return back in the evening from work to cook for me and the children as well. That was, I mean, that it was exciting. And if he had to travel, my first son had to take that place. Make sure I had breakfast tray on my bed before he goes to school. And then when he comes back from school, come and see what is available. And then, of course, we had people who saw just how much toll this was having on my husband, my children, and myself. And for a long time, I couldn't just imagine people coming into the house to come and take over my kitchen until a wise man, and we both know who that wise man, had to say to me that it was pride because I would do that for others. My husband said that to me. People were asking. And when when that sank in, I had to open that door. And believe me, 3, 4 women came into this house every Thursday. They will go and do the grocery. They will come and cook the food and pack it so that we're sure that there is freshly cooked food for my husband and my children to eat when they come back from work and school. And he does not have to come back from work after a full day and get into the kitchen. No, this requires a strong support system. And I want to speak to those who have to take care of people like us. We understand how challenging it is for you. Not once did my husband ever make me feel like I was a body. I even asked him if he had seen this coming, would he still have married me? A strong support system is needful, but we also have to care for the families that are caring for such sick people. We need to be there to encourage them. We need to be there to give a helping hand. We need to ask them, how are they coping? We need to find out about their mental health. We need to check and make sure that they don't have secondary, trauma from taking care of somebody else, including the children. When a child grows up in a home where there is somebody sick all the time, we need to check on them and make sure they're, doing okay. We need to check on their mental well-being. And that is for the wider society, the wider community, the wider family to take care of.
Thank you, Irene. At this point, I'd like to say thank you to every caregiver who's tuned in today. If you are part of a support system for someone who is in a state of, disease that just makes it impossible for them sometimes to be able to care for themselves, and you are there as a caregiver or as a support system for the caregiver and for the family, we want to salute your hard work. We want to thank you on behalf of the ones that you care for. We want to thank you on behalf of society, and we want to say thank you for all the work that you do. We want to encourage you that just the same way God came through for Irene and her household, God will come through. He would hear your prayers, and the things that you have asked him concerning your loved ones will come to pass in the name of Jesus. So we celebrate you. You are not fighting a lost cause, and the God of hope will meet you exactly where you have asked that he meets you in the name of Jesus. Irene, I want to ask you one more question, and that is, talk to me about the burden of proof. Because if I had someone's, when I have someone's money self in my system, it makes me really, there's this thing about accountability. If I was in the middle of a project and someone gave towards that project, it becomes the reason why I work extra hard to ensure that that project does not flop, or does not feel, because I do not want people to waste their resources. Not to talk of someone who gave up his precious lungs for you. Talk to me about the burden of proof, because I imagine that it will be there.
It is there. And a few times people have had to tell me that Irene, slow down. I knew there was, I have been, there's this sense of urgency with which I do things. And it's like, I don't know how much time I have. And I want to, I want to die empty. I want to do everything that God wants, ordained for me to do, for giving me the second chance to live. And so sometimes I walk with that sense of urgency, and it's also coming from the fact that um, I'm carrying a precious gift that somebody died to give me. And I think about that, my organ donor. I think about the family, and you get to this zone where you can never thank God enough. You don't even get the opportunity, because here you don't get to know who your organ donor is, so meet with the family. You don't get the opportunity to be able to say thank you for giving. And that is a hard one for me, I have to admit. Every part of me longs to be able to see my organ donor's family and hug them and say thank you. Thank you for consenting. Thank you for these gifts. See what God is using it to. And it's something I still struggle with, not being able to do that. So absolutely, there is that sense of responsibility. There is that sense of indebtedness, inadequacy to thank God enough for this opportunity, for this precious gift. And for as long as God keeps me here, I will live out my gratitude, my thankfulness, by making every moment here count and be a conduit of His blessing, a conduit of hope to as many as He will bring to my space. Because I don't know how else I could ever thank God enough.
Thank you for your response, Irene. I'm getting to my limits. This soberness is becoming too much. So it's not even that I'm feeling sleepy. It's that
before you get to your limit, you need to bring in someone.
I have a question that I'd like for you to tackle. It says, what advocacy do we need to make it possible in Nigeria and indeed in Africa to elevate organ donations to what obtains in better developed environments? What kind of advocacy? And I'm not trying to suggest this to you, Irene, because wahala no dey finish for your hand. But honestly, I think that is a conversation we need to begin to have. Is a conversation. It's an idea we need to mute to government and governmental agencies, about the need to make this something that is available, because I don't think that is not that we have a dearth of doctors who can perform these surgeries. I don't think that that's what it will be. I don't think that there's honestly that we don't have qualified hands to be able to carry this out. But we need enabling environments and laws that make this, the process, structured process, so that people can do this. I think that if that is even done, and I'm still going to let you talk, then it would mean that we would have less and less cases of illegal organ harvesting and donations. So please speak to that.
Well, I'm just actually going to allow somebody who is better qualified than me to doing this today in the build up, I didn't think that it was going to get this much traction. Um, I actually stumbled by accident to find out that April is actually lung donation, organ donation awareness month. And it just tied up the two for me. We're doing limb loss awareness, and we must also do organ donation awareness. And for me, who is beneficiary of both, I wanted to bring it together. And the truth of the matter is that in my story, the organ donation tends to get buried by the amputation and all that the Feet of Grace Foundation is doing. And there are a lot of people with so many questions who are dealing with the issue of organ donation. And especially in Nigeria, I agree with you. Absolutely, we need to heighten the advocacy for a proper structure that will guide the process. And it's in that spirit I'm going to ask my husband to join us and add his voice to this. Okay, let me go
Can you
mute
hear
him.
me? You can hear me? Yeah, okay. I think we're talking about the question there, how can we advocate in Nigeria, in Africa? I think it's one, by talking about it. And secondly, we also need to, while speaking about this, strengthen the health system. As of now in Nigeria, the only solid organ donation that can be done is kidney, renal transplant. And most times that is from a live donor. But certainly it is something that we need to talk about. There need to be advocates from all sides, not just government. There's a cultural barrier. People, all kind of things about not wanting to be buried with all the organs complete. That's dust to dust. When you asked a question earlier on, Bidemi, about why can't you, given an organ. And what came to my mind, I'm sorry, well, I always think as a Christian, Jesus gave all for me to be here. Everything died completely. So what is my own? When when you die, you die. If a part of what you can contribute is to give life to someone else, that indeed is a blessing. And I always say sometimes, when we people go post-mortem and all of that. If I just drop this here. If there is a problem and they think that the problem is in the brain, sometimes you cannot do something about it right there and then. It needs to be fixed before they can dissect and all into it. They won't wait for that to happen before the person is buried. The skull is sewed back in place. The brain is out. Meanwhile, the person is buried. The family may never know that. So, what am I saying in essence? In reality, it's not. It's a cultural thing that we really need to deal with, and to see it as service to humanity and service to others. Whilst we continue to advocate and governments and all of that health system, and for people to know that. And I will speak to kidney donation. We can live a full and unhindered life with one kidney. And if the need arises, you really are given a chance of life to someone else, whilst you still maintain your own life going to the end. So I think it's advocacy and talking about it like the way we are doing now, and be ready to answer questions that people bring up. And I think with time, the mindset will change, and hopefully we have continually improving government and health system that can actually support some of the things that we're talking about.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, so since you're here, I might as well also ask you to weigh in, and just give a bit of perspective and encouragement for caregivers of those who are struggling in their health at this time, at that level at which you gave care to Irene, you and your family gave care to Irene in those years.
Um, yep, I think you already acknowledged and thanked caregivers. It's a whole challenging and difficult space to be in. I would say for me it was also even more challenging because as a doctor I could tell what all the potential risk factors were, all the potential complications and things like that. But you need to go beyond yourself and to think of the other person you are providing support to. Sometimes providing support can be difficult in the sense that you feel so much for the person and you are trying to be strong all the time, and you forget that you also need to find space to express and allow yourself to be weak and others to strengthen you to be able to give strength to those you are supporting. And in the wait period, you also wanting the person who is waiting for the transplant to be in the best possible state, both physically, mentally, and psychologically. So I think it's all of that, and for me, it was never really thought about it on the long term. It was a day by day basis, and for me, it was a responsibility to give the best and to ensure that the support was there. It wasn't just her; it was all of us passing through it.
Um, Thank you, sir, for sharing. Ladies and gentlemen who've been following us, it's been almost an hour, 30 minutes of having this conversation. And definitely, we cannot exhaust this conversation today. Perhaps it's something that Irene will consider to come back and do, possibly do a Q&A surrounding, and maybe bring a few more experts to have this conversation before the month of April is over, since it's Organ Donation and Organ Loss Awareness Month. So it's a great time to have the conversations and continue to have them. So before we go, Irene, I'd like for you to speak to, if imagine that the family of your donor are standing in front of you. Perhaps they might even be online, you don't know. They know you, you don't know them. So perhaps they may stumble across this video somewhere sometime. What would you like to say to this person? And yeah, I'd like to hear what you'd like to say to them, to his or her family, because we don't know who it was that gave you their lungs.
They don't even know me. The secrecy is on both sides. But interesting thing was that I actually prayed that one day somebody from that family would stumble on something that I have done and heard that, oh, I got a lung transplant on April 13th, 2013, and then they can tie the two together and say, ah, okay, it's probably somebody from their family. It is a person from their family. What would I say to them? I would say to them, I don't even have words that can articulate my appreciation. What I would just want to do is to hug them and show them what this past 10 years have been, having an opportunity to live a second chance for purposeful living, what it has translated to, the number of children that have received limbs, the number of women that have received limbs, that have received support to start new businesses, People who would never have had the opportunity to work again, who are now working because I got the lungs and I'm here. I just want to be able to show them that. Thank you for consenting. Thank you for the gifts that your family member gave me. Thank you. Thank you. And I prayed honestly, that wherever they are today, as they celebrate the 10th memorial of their loved one, the presence of God will surround them and it will be so palpable that they will know that something extraordinary, something supernatural is around them, that they will feel the presence of God and his arms around about them today. Yeah, that's my prayer. That's
Thank you, Irene. Doctor, would you like to weigh in on that? And then we will round off this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the family. Thank you to the system. Thank you to, sometimes when we talk about the whole transplant thing here, and like one of the questions that asked initially, do you consider that a miracle? Of course it is. Here you are in a foreign land and all of that, and God makes provisions. And if we have to go through the various pathways before we reach this stage of transplantation, how initially it was rejected and all of that, how somebody took it upon himself to go around without telling us, trying to answer all the questions for 2 years. These are doctors. So, any way you want to look at it, it is the hand and the doing of God. And for that, we are grateful. But like I always say, it's the grace of God and cooperation of men. People cooperated with the grace of God to make it happen. And for that, we are grateful. And I just want to, since I have the opportunity, I saw a comment on the Facebook saying, Bro P, please make this come alive for husbands. Yes, husbands, if you are out there, men, if you are out there listening, the support and the provision it's not a burden. It's a responsibility and a gift and an opportunity God has given to you to be who He has made you to be. And really, if I have to do it again, certainly I will do it again over and over and joyfully and unto God, because God has given the enablement and the strength and all to do it. And that's what God has made you to be as a man, as a husband in the space where you are. So, again, if you are a caregiver in one way or the other, supporting someone, don't give up, don't lose hope. Sometimes you need to find support for yourself also, but please know that the person who is in the midst of this, let me just say this, all through the period of the medications and the gadgets and all, there are times when I was caught between knowing knowing fully well that she needs to take the medications, but yet I understand the burden of having to take medications as if it is food you are eating. I remember a time when she says, look, don't don't medicate this house. Of course, I know she needs to do that procedure. She needs to do that thing. But yet, I have to understand what she is saying and the difficulty and the challenge. When you have to take so many number of medicines in the morning, in the evening, 10 tablets, 12 tablets, sometimes I say, look, it's past time when you should take these drugs. But of course, you also need to realize that it's also a challenge for the person and find a way to balance that and to say, look, I understand what you are going through. I know it is difficult. I'm just encouraging you in any way we can provide support, and together you'll make a difference. So, organ donation is something that we should continue to encourage and to advocate for in Africa, in Nigeria, and indeed avail ourselves as opportunities to be blessings to others if we can, as being donors when necessary and when needed. And of course, one day we all die. It's actually something we rejoice that we die as Christians going to heaven. I mean, we all want to go to heaven now. So if I can leave something behind to bless others, that would be a blessing indeed. I'll be grateful to God. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Irene. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this, and we're grateful to God that Irene is still with us. And like she said to us, there's proof that people live many, many years, post organ transplant, and we are believing God and holding on to God for her, to so that she'll remain with us for a long time to be able to do this incredible work she's been doing post organ transplant. We join our voices to say thank you to the family for giving their consent, and we want to, standing with Irene, say that that would not be in vain, because it's already proven in 10 years the difference that that can make. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Bidemi Makmodi, and it's been a pleasure to, my great pleasure to anchor this. I'm indeed very sober, and I'm determined not to dream about organ transplant tonight. So please pray for me. Thank you, everyone, and do have a great rest of your evening. God bless you, and bye bye.
Thank you very much. We end the broadcast now.